It takes me great pleasure to now introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Samuel Fongwa. Dr. Fongwa is a senior research specialist at the Human Science Research Council based in Pretoria. He holds a Master of Education and a PhD in Higher Education and Development. Dr. Fongwa's work is cross-disciplinary, with a focus on the link between universities and societies. And his research focus and his research over the years have focused on higher education policy, the role of the university in development, university community engagement, skills development, and graduate outcomes. He's been part of several large-scale research projects linked to higher education, and some of the projects include the Council of Higher Education's 20-year review of higher education in South Africa, the Southern African Regional University Association profiling of higher education in SADC, the Southern African Development Community countries, as well as HRANA, the Higher Education Research and Advocacy Network in Africa project. And this project spans across 8 African countries. And also, he was also involved in the recently completed African Research University Alliance, ARUA, funded project on doctoral collaboration across the 16 member universities. So today, Dr. Fongwa will be sharing his emerging insights into his new area of research interest, and this is universities, anchor institutions, and development. So it takes me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Fongwa.
Thank you for such a kind, long, almost boring introduction. But sometimes the organizers have to send some of those bios. I really want to appreciate Rhodes University. I want to appreciate the organizing committee of the symposium for inviting me. I don't know why I didn't send in an abstract. I think I must have made the call, but when I saw the invitation, I couldn't say no to it. And really, thank you very much for inviting me. And I also just want to make a note. I think the organizing committee will be dealing with that. But I brought a gift as a thanks for inviting me of a book we published last year in August. And it's titled University, Society and Development, African Perspective of University Community Engagement in Secondary Cities. It's a project from which my current interest on anchor institutions was formed. And so I would like to share a copy with every institution here. I think you will liaise with the organizing committee. Going to my talk, at first, I just want to recognize the fact that this initiative I'm presenting now is part of, actually, it's a coalition of 2 different projects or initiatives. The one for which I was still invited at the time through a partnership between the University of Victoria and Rutgers University in the US, that was being coordinated by Inatelo Trust. And the idea behind the project was to begin to start thinking around what is the implication, what is the meaning of anchor institutions, which is a very US concept within South African context. I was fortunate to be part of the researcher, on the team, but along with really established African scholars and as well as US-based scholars. Professor Hondi was part of the team. Judy was there, and a whole lot of other very established community engagement scholars who kept giving input into the work that I was doing. Down the line, when the report was almost ready, the former Vice Chancellor here, Professor Salim Baga, also made inputs. Nico Clote did make inputs. He wrote me upward from Rutgers University in the US. And so this is really a collaboration from that one side. And then I got funding from the NRF. Start thinking around being a new university, sort of like a university, and the work I had done for the past 10, 15 years, I always looked at the role of the university in hindsight. So 10, 15, 20 years after the university was established, what is the university doing in its community? You can go to the first slide, please, or second, actually, third. And so we were asking the question, how is Salt Lake University positioning itself within Kimberley, within the Northern Cape, 5, 6, 7 years after it was established? The project started from 2019. Not moving.
Is it the battery?
I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. So that just is just about framing the context that Prof also was framing around what the university is supposed to be doing in society. And so we were asking ourselves from a sub-lucky position, how is this university positioning itself within its new context? And similarly, and you only get to realize that later on, around the history of anchor institutions in the US, with the collapse of some of the metros and the establishment of universities within the city, to be able to kind of serve as catalysts to revitalize the economy. So similarly in Kimberley, the mines closing up largely, and we were looking at the university maybe as a potential source of economic activation or recovery. So what I'm trying to say here is that the mission of the university has always been evolving around its role in society. From the early years of the university serving as churches, it was to serve, provide priests and teachers, medical doctors for the society. That role has evolved in different ways. And now looking at the university as an agent for development, it becomes clear increasingly that most universities are realizing that their communities are intrinsically tied to theirs. And universities cannot continue to be passive about what is happening within their immediate or ethnic communities. And hence, what we are calling a place-responsive approach, and we'll talk about the notion of anchor institutions and if we should use the term or not. Of course, there is a sense that anchor institutions have always been referred only to universities, but actually they are much broader than universities. And so there's a tension between universities coming in as anchors and having this hegemonic role within the community, which is not supposed to be, because anchor institutions are a range of institutions, the university just being one of these, including churches, faith-based organizations, the government. In some cities, the government becomes really strong player in terms of economic output. But then what are these? What are these anchor institutions? And here we're trying to provide a definition that carries with it a number of concepts which you can use as handles to begin to move towards an empirical study of what anchors are supposed to be or could be in South African context. So here we highlight a number of keywords which I will talk to individually or as my talk goes on. So we see anchors as of course being rooted in the communities, which are not easy to just up and move like the normal businesses. They are supposed to have the ability to engage in long-term planning with their communities. And sometimes that has been the critique of most universities who find themselves in a community or in a city as enclaves, and there is no enough engagement between the university and the society. And very importantly, as even as the Vice Chancellor mentioned, the willingness and the ability to be able to deploy the institutional resources, human capital, physical resources, structures towards the betterment of the whole community. So it is intentional. It is supposed to be very intentional at the institutional level and not just by an academic. And in my opinion, I believe it is supposed to be a shift from the heavy economic focus, which the early conceptualization of anchor institutions should be, to provide a more inclusive, comprehensive role in terms of social, environmental, and cultural emphasis. And so, Leslie Bank, my colleague, who also this is a chapter in this book, has done some work on anchor institutions, especially here in the Eastern Cape. And his argument has always been, even before I got into this work, that universities are supposed to be place-based organizations. Even right from 1997, in 2007, the OECD's very well-cited report, globally competitive, locally engaged, is that in as much as universities are supposed to be globally competitive, it's very absolutely important that they have a place-based identity that is very intentional, that is very proactive. And so I think that as argued by Kempton, serving as anchor institution, as an anchor, enables universities to generate interactions reflecting both the concept of proximity that's relevant and community without the risk of becoming localistic. And that has always been a critique, even from academics around those of us who are involved in community engagement, that we become so localistic and we don't produce enough globally competitive research, which is not supposed to be the case. My community engagement initiative should be able to enable me publish in any high impact journal anywhere in the world. But there is all that tension. And so, of course, I've already spoken to this, why a place-based focus for universities. Bang goes on to argue the role of universities as city builders has lasted overlooked. And he makes the argument that post-94, the government seemed to have just embraced the largely British system of education and kept the institutions the way they are, with the historically Bantu universities being focused in the rural areas, while the historically white universities seem to have this international posture. So that has plagued the universities again in this tension of who becomes global and who becomes local, what kind of work we do for you to be able to publish or to produce knowledge that is acceptable by the global community. The picture that and so I think that depending on the conditions, and we have seen that in South African context, universities may serve as growth poles, energizing their surroundings or as enclaves isolated from their neighborhoods. And when I was doing my master's many years ago, back home, I was looking at this university that was established 10, 15 years before, and how it has transformed its immediate surrounding. Even though for my finding it was very unintentional. But again, I was looking at that with the University of Fort Hare. And this university that has been here for 80, 90, 100 years. And there seemed to be a lack of the university playing that similar role within the Alice community. And the question was why? It's serving as an enclave, or is it supporting economic growth within its community? Of course, there could be many different reasons for that. And some of the reasons I started to pull out in my thesis, that we have experienced some of these cases. And if you go to some of these universities, they're actually doing community engagement and of very good quality. But for some reason, it's failing to speak to the immediate community within which the university is established. And so I look at anchors around four more facets. And so it's, first, I like to put the intellectual role first, as the Vice Chancellor was always saying. Universities are supposed to be spaces for intellectual engagement, producing knowledge and good knowledge. But in the process of doing that, they play other roles. And I like showing it in this diagram, which, oh my God. I'm so sorry. Somebody should have said something. Oh. How did you follow me? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so yeah. Can you remember what I was saying when I was doing it? Okay, so I was here and I was saying, I like to have the core academic function first. I'm not here when you have it as third. Doesn't matter, it's not a classification, a ranking, but I just like to have, because that is the first core function of the university, the academic, the core institutional function, which is research, knowledge production, its quality teaching, its development of the whole person, as the prof was saying, in terms of teaching and learning, and not just skills for employment. Of course, and it's ensuring sustainability, which has always been a key factor around funding and being able to continue doing what the university is supposed to be doing. So that's for me really the first core function of a university that is supposed to be serving as an anchor institution. The next being economic engine for local economic development. And here it's common knowledge, and I'll show some of the empirical evidence from our study in Kimberley, itself, like the university is a measure, it's supposed to be a measure employer of local skills, and even with a more key intention towards the minority groups. The university is a big purchaser of local goods and services, supposed to develop and support local workforce. Some universities, they train the municipal workers, they train this, they train that, and of course, they attract business and investors into the community. But as I said, sometimes the university is very oblivious of this role that it's supposed to be playing. It's left to major corporates, it's left to opportunistic businesses, and I don't know if you saw the recent book by Professor Janssen about the capture of some of the universities, and this second function becomes part of what pulls down the core function of the university and not being used to support the work of the university. Of course, the university is a major developer of the real estate sector with buildings, residences, and a whole lot of infrastructure. And very importantly, as well as the first function, is the public or social good function of the university, which is supposed to be as important as any of the aspects in this four quadrants. And that speaks to some of the things as well as Prof was saying, build and support a positive community experience and decent public health in some areas, develop democratic values, and of course provide a platform for engagement where people's voices can be heard and not being suppressed in any form. And so this demands, for me, in my understanding, three main attributes. There is supposed to be a clear place-based policy or mission of the university, and that needs to be measurable or observed policy documents, whatever the case might be. How the university implements this policy should be seen in the way its resources, its funds, and leverage within the university, and of course the issue of transformation of place, but also transformation of people as that takes place. So,
don't forget your slide.
Thank you. So, those are the three main attributes. And so, that for me serves for this presentation as kind of the conceptual lens for which we are trying to look at the notion of anchor institutions. And so, in the next couple of minutes, I want to now go into how that has been received, played out within South African context. And what I did before this slide, and if you see this slide, I went to the website of some of the South African universities just to search for the word anchor and see who is using the word anchor and how are they using it from a point of policy. How is the word anchor institution being used in the South African higher education space? Of course, with its perceived or potential biases within the concept. And so, as I was doing that, I stumbled on this 2019 visit that took place between the minister and a big delegation to the US to work with to meet the AITF, which is the Anchor Institution Task Force in the US, which was the mother body for the Anchor Institution research and work within the US context. So the minister went with a number of delegations, maybe some people sitting here
were part of that delegation. So what was interesting for me in the last paragraph of this report, and this is from enmity to maybe bias, maybe whatever the case may be, is that even within here, the minister began to speak while in the US about the need for South African higher education and community engagement to shift towards an anchoring stance. And it says, Dr. Blake indicated that the marriage of DUT was beliefs to the anchor strategy as an aspect of the district development model.
And so when I was looking at this last night, I remember the conversation we had here about the term anchor institution, and for us to begin to think of a new concept. Because one of the members of the reference team we did was very categorical about not wanting to use the word anchor institutions. And I was asking myself,
Can this be
the term district development model?
but of course that's what very thinking. Although more things need to be done on this front, being part of the more community institutions have now the delegates to become more intentional in developing their relationship with their neighborhoods. Of course, this is in 2019, and this is at least 10 or so years after we have been doing community engagement. What does the minister mean in this segment? Is it just another political rhetoric, or is there going to be any kind of interpretation from this? But what he's saying is that there is beginning to be some kind of acceptance of the notion of anchor institutions within South African space, coming from the highest office. And then through my work going down into the different websites, I got delayed on the Nelson Mandela University website because I was thinking I saw one of the documents talking about the shift. And what came to me is that Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University speaks of the metropolitan, speaks of local. But now we move from Nelson Mandela Metropolitan to Nelson Mandela University. Does it in any way interpret us moving away from the place to the international? Of course, that may not be it, but that is a way of interpreting how we are relating with our space. And I've done some work in Nelson Mandela, and they are very engaged with different stakeholders in the community, the business, the industry, but even the graduates. We have very interesting graduate programs to support graduates into work for oriented learning. But that could be an interpretation of that shift of names. And that increases the tension between community engagement and constitution. And this is why the university is doing community engagement. And then UWC, from the website again, so that was NMU to NMU, and that could be my interpretation based on what I'm using, the tools I'm now using within the anchor space to begin to ask some of those questions. And then UWC on the website, you're looking at the 2016-2020 institutional plan. It's very intentional of it being increasingly perceived as an anchor institution, helping to profile its metropolitan sub-region as knowledge hub and desired destination, and goes on and on. But here again, the notion of anchor is being embraced almost without being interrogated. What does it mean for UWC to become an anchor institution? Of course, there are things that you can see happening within the institution, which is good. There's a clear policy and it's being implemented. But what does it mean for South African context using the word anchor institution? Of course, being at Rhodes, I couldn't have presented without saying something about Rhodes University. But when I was doing, oh no, sorry, supposed to be Rhodes University. Okay, I have a slide on Rhodes University, and then when I was presenting the work to the reference team, I was made to understand from this work that Rhodes University had this Vice Chancellor's program on reviving Graham Town schools. And it says being part of the Rhodes University campaign to being responsible the needs of its immediate and ethnic community within its policy discourse. The university acknowledges that, and I quote, the future and sustainability of Rhodes University is intimately bound up in the future and sustainability of Grahamstown. Some of us came here this morning without maybe showering because there is no water in the city.
And so the academic work is being influenced by what is happening in the city. And for some reason, there's no way for us to be oblivious and ignore what is happening within the city. And then the University of Victoria, who has done a bit of work around the notion of anchor institutions, has developed both on Mamelodi campus, but also in the Hatfield area, different kinds of relationship between the stakeholders, the city government, and different stakeholders towards transforming both areas. And I'll show you in some of their publications now. But adopting a city improvement district within the Greater Hatfield precinct was a clear partnership between the Chinese municipality, University of Victoria, and but also, and this is all from the website, as I said, that is a very loose methodology which cannot be argued as methodology for me to write anything, but this is just early thinking around how the concept was being used. This University 2021 Central Institution seeks to contribute to enhance, at least doubling its research output, in-depth cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary engagement. The secondary focus of the 21st Century Institute is to allow this to pursue strategic role as an anchor and boundary organization producing research. So it again goes to the first function, serving an anchor but focusing on research and quality research. And you've seen from the different case studies how different universities are still to serve as an anchor, but functioning in different spaces within the quadrant. And so that leads me to, I'll talk more in terms of bringing that together. Example of an anchor place-based role is the Chimolongo Digital Innovative Precinct. And again, all of this just came from the website. No interviews, nothing. And of course, South Clarke University, where our focus is kind of for the international level. And there is no clear usage of the word anchor institutions within the policy documents, not at the time when we were doing this, but there is emphasis on place, and very strong emphasis on placemaking within the region, within the community. And so there are a number of projects that have been initiated, and some of them right from the VC's office towards serving a more place-based role, of course, while being nationally competitive and globally engaged. But one of the exercises that we did was to collect empirical data from SPU. So we had interviews from the Vice Chancellor. I spoke to the Vice Chancellor, the DVC, some deans, some academics, went to the community, spoke to them. And the idea was to find out from the different stakeholders, how do you perceive the new university in your city, in your community? Is there a sense of that our destiny being tied together and how that's playing out? I'm too busy with the qualitative analysis, but we did collect empirical data from staff, expensive, student expensive, university spending, and you can imagine how much building is going on there for those who have gone to Kimberley. To be able to say how much is the university in this early stage contributing to the community, to the GDP of Francis Bag, but also to the GDP of the province. And we found it fascinating to see how much from our very modest, we use lower and upper band, but we focus on the lower band to say, and this was done in 2021, 2022, Dr. Sompondo, he was very, very helpful. This is when lockdown was happening and businesses were partially closed. And to see how much contribution a 5,000, 6,000 student, 5,000 student university is contributing to its economy. But what it's almost concerning is that most often the university has no idea of what is happening in the community, of how much it is contributing to the municipality, to the province, and to the city. And this is where the intentionality about anchor institutions comes to me. If this is happening, Then the university becomes intentional as to how much we have to procure from Kimberley versus how much we have to procure from Gauteng or from Cape Town. How much employment we want to give to the locals and how much employment we want to give to those coming from outside. That begins to inform policy, begins to inform practices, and begins to inform how the university leverages its resources. The paper has been. We are working on comments we got from higher education journal to look at where we are presenting this work on the economic impact of surplus university in the city. And so this is some of the work again. Now I need the literature to see who is writing about anchor institutions and how is that writing being done. So of course. Thank you. Of course, Leslie Bang had the book in 2016, had a chapter in that book. But again, it's the emphasis on place. So much work has been done from UP, the Mamelodi Pre-University Academic Campus, and it focuses on academic educational support. The other article on activating the edge is looking at how the university can use its infrastructural resources, buildings to be able to influence development of the city, and how to a large extent speaks about the gated nature of most South African universities and how community engagement is taking place across the steel gates that seem to limit how much engagement can take place based on the way the infrastructure of the universities are being made. And then the next article, integrating the edge, is really looking at the University of Pretoria Hartfield campus and neighboring area, how transformation has taken place, and it's become quite dynamic, but also much more expensive for the common person to be able to live in Hartfield. And so the implications for when the anchoring role of the university is left to business and not a very collaborative approach is done to that. The last article is the article that that came from the work we did in taxing. And so in conclusion, the last, I think I have two more slides. What is the implication for using the notion of anchor institutions within the African context? I think there are many things, and we had a very interesting discussion yesterday. We were just about 15 of us here, and it was always very, very engaged. I wonder what will be this morning. That there is a need to critically interrogate the policy and practical orientation of the notion of university community engagement. And somebody made a comment: is anchor institution an evolution of university community engagement? What is the place of university engagement within the anchor institution discourse? What are the place-making tenets of university community engagement or community development? If we want to develop the community, and development goes beyond economic development, what aspects of community engagement can we begin to already borrow and use towards place-based development? But even more importantly is to begin to conceptually problematize the potentially hegemonic implications of the concept anchor institutions. What does it mean for us? And is it possible to think of a district development model, the role of the university in that? What aspects of anchoring or placemaking or DDM can South African universities begin to assume? Can we have a consensus around what indicators to use towards that? But I found it very interesting in the work. Can all South African universities serve an anchoring role, and how? I think, and it might be wrong, there may be possibility for SAISEF and for collaboration between some of these bodies to begin to make sense of what AITF or anchor institution means. In conclusion, I think universities have a social and economic responsibility to their communities in place. We can have communities of practice, we can have communities of many things, but communities of place becomes as important as these. University community engagement remains an important pedagogical tool for universities, in different aspects of the work of academia. However, anchor institutions or place-based approach provides, for me, potentially inclusive conceptual and functional training for universities to respond to tangible local and regional development needs. Each university will have to identify its anchor mission within its context, within a clearly defined policy-driven context, and that will also play out in sourcing as well as in outcomes. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening. And sorry for my story.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for that informative and insightful presentation. And very interesting when you say universities no need to adopt a place-based and place-responsive development approach. Thank you very much. We still have a few minutes left before we break for tea, so we can take 2 or 3 max questions. Wendy is the timekeeper, so she's just going to make sure I stick to the time. Where's the mic, Apple? Questions from the floor? Comments, discussions?
Good morning. Someone has a very something that research. I don't know what happened to the rules, but where I'm coming from, but also to the university, we believe in community engagement, partnership, and commercialization. So through the commercialization aspect of the partnership, we try to bring out the confidence of the research that the community makes of the global statements. So I don't know what to say about that, but the presentation will be exciting of the partnership with the nation. What we have to say about
it. Can we have 2 more questions and then?
So I've got a question from Dr. Nelly Wilkazi-Sharkey. How do we address the standardization of community engagement across South African universities? We seem to be doing it in different ways in styles, and there's no clear framework that speaks to DHEC. Objectives and how can we measure ourselves on this? It seems most universities have not yet embraced the process of CE, even though it is listed as one of the core functions of the university. Workload and curriculum design do not seem to be guided clearly to embrace CE as we do with teaching and learning research.
Then we'll take a look. Another?
Morning. Yeah, thanks for the interesting presentation. I just want to find out, like, specifically to so Lucky, which is the university that found itself in a situation was mainly around the business planning in particular, and that has dwindled down. So, what do you think the role of the university, of course, in the context of competitive engagement, and given that the university are primarily really focusing on building knowledge, generation of knowledge as focus also related there. So how do we see ourselves transforming society, particularly with regard to the business part of it, given that that particular city was mainly built around this system, and now things have changed for the strategies that we're thinking.
Sam will respond to those 3 questions, then we'll take the other 2.
Thanks for the questions. I think I'll have a go at the first. More or less will be the second. She offered, and I think of the fun. And the The third question, I mean, I think it's something that we have to, SPU is what now? It's just under 10 years old, and this American politician said, if you want to get a great city, be a great university and come back in 200 years. But now we have, that was many years ago. Now we have technology and we can bring it to 200 years to 20 or 30 or 40 years. But it needs, as the first question alluded to, collaboration between the university and the community. And the community is very broad for everybody: business, government, civil society, and so that needs to happen. Some of it is happening at SPU, some of it is not happening at SPU. But you can see already how much SPU is contributing to the local GDP. There's potential for that to happen even more. But it goes to the first point around collaboration and acknowledging the fact that our destinies are tied to each other. And so that's for me a very loose response, but something that needs to be negotiated and renegotiated as the institution grows. The question of collaboration, I think, as I mentioned, there is, you can't write about community engagement without talking of collaboration and partnerships. And so I made mention to the OECD's report, which is it's very good report, globally competitive, locally engaged. Universities must collaborate globally. They must have partnerships globally to be able to also validate the kind of knowledge we do, be able to validate our teaching and learning work. But that, in my opinion, has over the years silenced the place-based role that the university is supposed to be playing. And so that collaboration and partnership needs to come back in as much as possible. I mean, we did some of the work we did for ALWA, which is the African Research University Alliance. We looked at the number of publications for African academic and co-authored publications. And it's very shocked to see how much less we publish, we co-author among ourselves. Within the continent. We published with UK, US, there was African countries, French speaking with France and the line, but there is not enough of that collaboration among us. South, but even in our locality. So I wasn't being silent about it, but somewhat the focus was really at the local level. Really? Yeah. The question was standards.
So in response to the question that I think came from the Zoom, I think that the Carnegie community engagement elective classification can have a place in being able to sort of collect that data. I don't know if I believe in the sort of standardization across institutions. I really think each institution has to be responsive to the local community, and so the classification reflects the diversity of the institution while establishing sort of questions that make institutions reflect on the best practices, the things that they need to do institutionally and in partnership with the community to make sure that we're responding to that broad definition that also puts some parameters or some guidelines around what the purpose of community engagement is and what the process should be. So I think it could be a really great tool in helping to sort of see what's happening across different campuses or different institutions in South Africa, and then from there, develop additional questions that focus on the things that you're most concerned around, either collaboration, development, anchor institution work, and there's an opportunity to look across different countries to do that analysis as well and shared learning communities practice. And so that evaluation is happening both internally, but also with partners across the globe who are deeply committed to community engagement work. And that standardization is really towards the end of best practices, community partnerships, community centered in this for greater impact.
So we'll take two more questions and then we'll wrap up. And then Shiva.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That was a two-pronged question. So the one is really about, does the university decide to be the anchor, or do you have to, does your community determine that you are the anchor in your setting? But my more substantive question is, can you give us a sense of, many of our universities were established pre-democracy. And so we have a race-based universities rather than place-based universities. And so how do we navigate, I think, the history of our universities in trying to sort of conceptualize our place in a new democracy? Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Sam. Sam, I'm just interested in the role of the SciTech. What do you envisage SciTech doing, and how do we do it, you know? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Let me go with the easier one first, maybe. For which I don't know the answer. I mean, I think science has played a very important role in providing that umbrella for community engagement in South Africa. And in a number of projects I have been involved with, we have that kind of a sense of approval when you have science being part of the project. So that role of validating the work that we are doing or that we intend to do. And so SciSF has played that role to a certain extent. I think part of the question more or less was referring to about the issue of sanitizing, maybe some of the potential gaps that SciSF could have played even more in terms of saying this is what we understand by community engagement. But again, it's not SciSF, because the white paper allows everyone to do community engagement the way we see it. And so there has been that gap, aligning between what the white paper is saying, what they are supposed to be doing, and what they are actually doing. And so I think for going forward, if South African community, as the minister is saying, we decide to find some kind of model for setting an anchor institution, then SciSF, as well as a whole range of other stakeholders, will have to come together, maybe convened by SciSF, the CHE, the department, USAC, and others, to say, how do we move our universities to become as globally competitive, but also as locally engaged? So that would be first a convening role. And from there, it might go up organically, depending on what the feeling is within the group. So it could be many things, but that's what comes to my head now. I mean, that's, sorry?
More an advocacy role.
Advocacy, it's already when you accept it and you are arguing for it. So just a convening role for the start. This is what is emerging from 2019 to now. What do you think about this concept? Is it something we want to embrace, and how do we embrace it? What does it mean for us? That would be a start for me. Advocacy will be the next level. The first question really is a difficult one. Race, place, and how history informs how the universities will want to serve as an anchor institutions or not. But I think that being what is happening in Kimberley could happen in Fort Hare and Alice. To what extent is the university committed to Alice? Now it's moving more and more to East London, and then it was really everything was happening much more in Alice than it is now. What are the relationships? How much procurement is the government wanting to do in Alice as opposed to East London and PE and everywhere else? And there are some of those things that the university can begin to do, irrespective of race or place, towards supporting the economic growth of the community. My time is gone. Thank you.